Everyone, and welcome to session 2 of the California Jobs First Project Financing Webinar Series. I'm Brian Coleman, Project Financing Manager with the Regional Economic Development Initiatives team at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to join us and learn from subject matter experts about various financing tools and strategies that can be used to advance economic development projects in your communities and regions. Before we get started, just want to go over a few quick housekeeping notes. There will be time for a Q&A at the end of today's presentation. And since attendee audio is muted, we ask that you please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions you may have. Our team will be monitoring the chat and will direct questions to our speakers as we wrap up their presentation. And then today's session is being recorded. Both the recording and the presentation slides will be shared with all registrants after the event. And then the recording will also be posted to our GO-Biz YouTube channel in the coming weeks. And if you missed the first session, the recording is already posted on that YouTube channel. We're happy to share that link with you all after the webinar. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers for today. We have joining us Larry Kosmont and Joe Dieguez of Kosmont Companies. Kosmont Companies is a nationally recognized leader in economic development, public-private finance, and real estate development projects involving government and private sector partnerships. And they're here today to walk us through how tax increment financing districts or TIF districts can support high-impact economic development projects. And they're here to share lessons from their work, helping communities evaluate and implement TIFs across the state. So Larry, I'll go ahead and give the floor to you.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. Thanks, GO-Biz. Always a pleasure. This webinar, Joe Dieguez and I are joint venturing this. We're co-presenting. And the point of this is really to give you a context on a tool. I mean, to use tax increment only makes no sense. First of all, you need to understand the context of the market. And second of all, how do you couple and what tools are there to couple with tax increment? That's the strategy. It's not just tax increment or TIF district. So we think the time is right. The time is right to use tax increment financing to induce private investment. That's the name of the game in economic development, especially in a transitioning economy. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to spend the first part of this setting forth the context of how one can use the knowledge that you need in the marketplace to trigger, to manage, to structure, and to advance economic incentives, including tax increment, that can work to induce private investment in a way that advances your community's interests. That's the strategy. That's the point of this. So Kosmont, as you know, has been around 1986, 39 years. That's why I look tired, by the way. And we basically have three practices, the economic development advisory in the blue, the real estate transactional in the red, and our public finance, SEC, MSRB registered practice in the green. Next slide. So Joe and I are going to take you through two key platforms, and they work together. I mean, understanding this new world of tax increment financing is absolutely key. Why? Because tax increment financing is one of the primary tools to advance your community in a post-redevelopment world. But you have to understand what you're advancing. You have to understand where the private sector is. And you also have to get a sense of where you want to go so that you can blend these motivations. These two sectors need each other, particularly in this economy. So the first section is about really how do you shape the future? How do you understand the present so you can get the tea leaves toward the future? Next slide. So the state of the industry, let's keep going. The state of the industry is that for the most part, all of you are going to be experiencing that projects are pretty stuck. It's not a secret. The truth is that developers will sometimes try and keep that a secret from us because they're afraid that if they come to City Hall or to County Hall and say, hey, my capital stack is just not working for me, they're afraid that they'll lose the support for the project. They're also afraid to go public with information that could disturb or create some unease and uncertainty in the capital stack commitments they already have. So the point of this is that projects are stuck, and our job is twofold. One is to figure out why they're stuck, and then number two, to figure out which tools we're willing to bring to the table to advance those projects forward. We deal in this life here of economic development with two stacks, a private capital stack and a public capital stack. The interesting thing is the public capital stack has different value add ingredients that we're going to talk about. And those are the collateral tools that we use with tax increment. But in today's world, as if it weren't complicated enough, we have expensive money, we have uncertain labor, we have escalating project costs, we have entitlement uncertainty in California, certainly. We specialize in uncertainty. In addition, you have tariffs, and you have a president that can wake up one morning and decide one thing or another. So all of this really adds a dimension of risk that has taken a capital stack set of participants, meaning lenders, investors, debt, and equity, and made them uncertain. And then we've had a digital economy come along and shift how consumers buy and shift where they work and change how they view what they're willing to do to leave the house versus what they do when they're in the house. They can buy under the roof. They don't have to go anywhere. So that changes the whole lexicon, if you will, of private investment. And then you have us, policy changes, CEQA changes, housing density motivation on the part of the state. It's a blender of change. If you add consumer preference changes to all of this, the economic uncertainty, and that's the reason that private investment trends are moving around. They're trying to figure out where it is they should make the investment when it comes to hard product, meaning construction above ground projects. It's much different than digital investment, right? But it's a reflection of that economy. So our strategy is about, can we use our zoning approvals, which bring value? Can we use our capital sources, which often is grants? The grant world has just proliferated, whether it's state or federal. Does it change? Sure. Will it change under Trump? I'll talk about that, but it's there. Can we use that? Can we couple it with TIF to unstick projects that we need? Next slide. So, that's really where the sort of the pedal hits the metal here, is how do you unlock private investment to value capture economic development? When we were in the redevelopment world, we just brought money to the table and put it down, and somehow it was relatively easy to get matching private investment. But we weren't dealing with an economy that was shifting digitally. We weren't dealing with the outflow of COVID behavior patterns. Life's different now. It really is. And so between the capital stack challenges and the interest rate changes and the state's density mandates on housing, and then the motivation accelerated by some terrible events like Palisades and Eden, the motivation to get to resiliency and sustainability and climate action measures, that's the context in which we're asking the private sector and the public sector to make decisions today. So we have to learn how to maximize accretive private investment. And private investment needs to learn how to figure out how to use our tools. And our tools are different now. Our tools are really zoning, tax increment, and what I call OPM, other public money grants. Other grants are like equity, but it's gift equity, not always quite a gift, by the way, but partially a gift. Our primary value capture tools, and you'll hear me use that phrase because this is a economy that requires P3 deals to bring value to the table, either an upgraded zoning or tax increment reimbursements, and convert that into a private capital stack that works for the developer, that delivers a project that we want. So we have to use our district strategically. We have to use our zoning as currency whenever we can. Not always easy because the state wants to interfere with the value of our zoning currency because it just wants to give it away. Look at AB 79. It's, oh, yeah, take it. So it's not always consistent, but it's applicable. And where you can use zoning to induce investment and shore up the private capital stack as the residual value land increases, does two things. It attracts that private investment, maybe it enables compliance with housing, but it also leverages your TIF district and public funding and grants. So next slide. So you'll hear me say that. I wanted to lay that groundwork down because for Joe to take you through TIF, which he will, I mean, we've now created 34 districts in the state since what, 2014. I mean, this is an evolving industry, these special districts, and we now have some new forms, right? But for him to take you through that is one thing. That's like saying, here's a hammer and here's how you use it. What we want to show you is how to use this together. What is that toolkit? Because TIP alone isn't going to deliver results. And zoning alone likely won't deliver the infrastructure that you need to get that investment, especially in a challenged era. And that era is defined by change. Housing, by the way, is the preeminent value accretion for a private sector investor. You're in a room having cocktails with private sector investors. They're looking for deals to invest in. It is mostly going to be about multifamily, maybe condominium ownership, and industrial. Could be retail, less. Office still on the sidelines. We're still seeing a transition in office in terms of value. And we're seeing office buildings, like there was an office building that traded in San Francisco just the other day for about 30 cents on the dollar from valuation 3 years ago. Seeing one California Plaza in LA, I think, is trading for about 200 million. It was appraised at 450 just 3 or 4 years ago. So we're seeing office still in a transitional framework, without a doubt. But here's the point. Here's the landscape, right? Housing is not a loss leader. It's really a cross growth driver for us and for them, right? Because for us, it's rooftops, and those rooftops have wallets in it that are staying in our community longer because they're not commuting to work every day, even if they're going back half the time. That household is sticking to our community longer. There's value capture there, right? Retail isn't what's going to capture that wallet and take it outdoors because they can just push the Amazon button. No, no, no. What retail becomes a mix of entertainment, of a place with rooftops around it. They work collaterally. They can't work independently anymore. So that's a big shift. I grew up in an era when I was a 26-year-old city manager. It was get me a Costco, get me a shopping center. Today we're going, what am I going to do with that parking lot? So it's changed. And telework has reconfigured office. Again, the whole behavior of consumers and the placement of their credit card and wallet is shifting because of these three columns. And finally, what you really find out is retail is a distribution network today. Most of that, more and more of that retail is coming through an industrial distribution network. So industrial and fulfillment becomes a key element to economic development. Next slide. So one of the takeaways that really has shifted on us is that if you would have asked me, look, can I get a fiscal impact report on housing? I would have said, sure, that's a loss leader. That would have been 10 years ago. Today, depending on the density, depending on the neighborhood, depending on the value, depending on the residential product, you will find that residential is accretive or break even to the public sector side of fiscal impact. It's much more accretive and profit margin oriented to the private sector because the rooftop delivers the customer, which keeps the retail in place. The rooftop sets the destination for industrial distribution. When Amazon solves the United States, it's solving for rooftops and access to rooftops. So that becomes the driver of economic development. And by the way, the state, for a whole bunch of different reasons, has said the same thing. They said, yeah, residential is what we want because we don't have enough and we can't make the economy work unless we have a residential supply for all demographic categories. The economy cannot work without that fulfilled supply. The demand is just exceeding it for all the reasons we know. We'll talk about that. So we think, in a way, that your housing element is your blueprint for economic development. We call it HEED. Because where the highest land residual value are, when you go plastering density in compliance with HCD and that RENA numbers, when you go plastering density all over your community, you're also creating value. And that's sort of the telltale as to where you're going to put a TIF district. Because where you get early value is where TIF is most prolific for you, most productive. Next slide. Back to retail and industrial trends, just quickly, as I've said this before, retail really equals distribution, digital convenience, and daily needs and services and events. It's not about, hey, let's just go shopping anymore. It's not that there isn't a shopping center that does that for us. It's just very few and much more seldomly. It's the retail chains and numbers tell the story. The retail chains are struggling. You can see all sorts of stores, whether it's discount or full price or medium, they're all resizing because the channel has changed. And retail can't thrive without distribution. And industrial is distribution, fulfillment, point of sale. The league is working on a redistribution of sales tax formula for point of sale and distribution warehouses. So for us, that world is changing as well. But the booming demand for industrial, make no bones about it, is starting with distribution and is moving to digital centers because the data centers are key and it's being escalated by the demand driven by AI, storage and transmission. And that's the future. Next slide. So just to reemphasize again, I hit this a little bit earlier, the world of office is not coming back. However, the world of office may shift for us. There may be a convergence of TIF capacity merged with office vacancy because there is a proposed AB 1045. There's a proposed statute that's hitting the governor's desk that would say that we can, in local communities, create a site-specific TIF district to convert office to residential, right? So a specific TIF deal, site-specific tax revenue deals, what I call them, SSTRs, for office conversion. So for suburban in particular, you're looking at a lot of, you go drive down the street today in any suburb, you're seeing lease signs all over the place. So it's interesting. This morning I went to the dentist in Torrance. All the medical buildings were full, not one lease sign. The two office buildings that were not medical had lease signs on there. It's just the way it works. So you can convert those offices to residential and use the tax increment from the investment to underwrite that production of housing. So let's see if that passes. I think it may. So that would change it. I talk about this a little bit later. But the old world of office is not coming back, and that just adds to where the wallet's going to be. Next slide. And so to sort of summarize the context of where the private sector is, because again, before we kind of talk about public policy and consumer, just wrapping, just know this, that even when the interest rates drop 25, 50 basis points, the underwriting of these deals is more complicated for all the trends that I just articulated and for all the policy drive that is focused around housing and climate infrastructure, which is where the state is going. And for all the shifts at the federal government level, all of this really leaves us with a capital stack and a bunch of investors with dry powder who've been on the sidelines for a year or two or three saying, I'm just not sure if I want to do that project in Sunnyvale or Livermore or Duarte or wherever that is. They've all been waiting because cost of money's been high. Cost of materials have been moving around. Tariffs show up. They're waiting for entitlements. And most of them are just saying, hey, I'd like to slow walk this for a while because I just don't know where it's going. So we've got three kinds of investors. We've got institutional funds that have a bunch of dry powder waiting to pounce. Many of them have been waiting for this discount on office. Many have been trying to figure out, could I convert office to residential? Many have been saying that all the density that you kind of crazy folks in local government are giving me at 50 dwelling units an acre, which doesn't pencil because I can't make that work. Can you give me less density, not more? Let me build townhomes. You need ownership anyway, and I can make money on ownership. And I can't make money on type 5 on 8-story construction. All of those investors sitting there, some in a project, stuck in the middle, not knowing what to do. And some just going, wow, I'm out of this project. I'm going to lose it. I borrowed at 4% 7 years ago. My 7-year loan is up. Goodbye. That's the context of where we are. So you have to decide, next slide, as local economic developers, you have to decide, you know, do you know where that project you've been advocating is going? Do you know where it is in the capital stack? Do you know what you want out of it? Is that project going to meet the test of the consumer? Is that project going to really underwrite for the investors who I've just demonstrated have been on the fence? Does that project advance public policy that's being imposed on us, whether it's RENA compliance or resiliency and sustainability, the infrastructure needed for that? That's what you need to be. That's your underwriting. Next slide, because if you can't get to the answers of those questions, you won't know where you're headed. And that's what you need to know. It's where are you going with the tools that we have, which I'll discuss in a minute, and what do you do with them? And bottom line, your tools revolve around three sets of issues. One is that there's a ton of money out there, Prop 4 and some federal dollars shifting away from shifting back to renewables, away from renewables to to direct energy sources, but still out there for the infrastructure that supports the delivery of energy and everything that goes with it. So you've got climate and infrastructure dollars available. We already know that housing is the primary value add from the private sector's perspective, and it's the primary target for sure in California, and that there are grants and tax credits for those. And then you've got private sector needing help but not knowing how to ask for it. So that's the equation, next slide, for economic development that sits today. And what are the approaches? So here's where we drill down. Based on all of that, there is a playbook for you. And the playbook is, how do you capture value? How do you capture that private investment? And one way to do it is you induce private investment and you take it and you make sure that that private investment gets placed into a district, like an enhanced infrastructure financing district, like a climate resilience district, like a CREA, Community Revitalization Investment Authority, which is more about affordable housing. But those districts give you the ability, saying that you can incentivize investment within the boundaries you create, those districts give you the ability to capture the value, to put it to work in additional infrastructure, which then leads to additional value. And that cycle of investment promotes your community and moves it forward. Collateral to the TIF district is, can you create some currency from government financing? When you have the TIF district, remember, you're taking the value of the tax increment and using it to underwrite investment. Can you bring a community facilities district, CFD, a tax exempt capital stack element of some of the requirements that you impose on the project? Can you augment that with state or federal grants? That's your money part. So approach one is capturing value with financing strategies. Number one on the hit parade is TIF. Number two are site-specific tax deals like CFDs. Number three, and equal to number one, is grant sources. Next slide. So basically, when you are looking at TIF as your primary opportunity, the best pitchers in your bullpen, if you will, are going to be your enhanced infrastructure financing district and your CRD. And CRDs are about to take off. One, because of the recent exigent circumstances. Kosmont spending a lot of time working on the analysis for both Eaton and Palisades in terms of tax increment. There may be a day when we could tell you that those areas might form a climate resilience district. I think it's better shot that they will than they won't. We'll be back someday talking about that. There's also on the right your CREA, your Community Revitalization Investment Authority, a little bit more limited in flexibility because it's committed to affordable housing, but equally powerful. Those are the TIF. That's the TIF artillery, and Joe's going to get into that in detail. Next slide. And the reason why it's important to note is because other folks have figured it out. There's 34 created, more coming. And you can see the flexibility. Again, we'll go through the details of this in the next chapter of this presentation. But just to look at this, and you can see whether it's downtown or infrastructure or mall reimagination, industrial, parks, open space, there is every product type, public and private, that becomes the essence of a TIF strategy. And that's the beauty of it. These are flexible tools. These are tools, when coupled with other value capture mechanisms, can really work to activate, energize that private capital stack, because these only work, next slide, these only work if they induce private investment. One of the gifts that you can come in addition to the private sector, in addition to forming the district, which by the way does not have to be adjacent. You can have sub areas that are non-contiguous. So there's great flexibility there. One of the gifts that you can come with, if you can get them to match and the timing to work, is all of those infrastructure dollars that exist out there. We think of climate as climate. It's the wrong answer. Climate equals infrastructure. When you're in the development business, when you're in the economic development business, we have to, in our world, we have to start seeing that these categories are just infrastructure categories. These come right out of the bills. Next slide. And in our state, yeah, and before I go there, just the point of it is that if you can capture early public dollars through these infrastructure sources or housing funding sources, and you can align that with the project infrastructure needs and requirements, whether it's a roadway, whether it's a park, whatever it is that we've negotiated to induce a public-private deal, when you can align these sources early, you really shift the momentum of the project forward. You unstick them. That's the whole point of this conversation, is what do we have to unstick projects that we want, that would advance the future and health of our community. Next slide. And in our case, in California, we just went big. We went long on climate infrastructure with Prop 4. November last year, we approved it, $10 billion for all sorts of climate funding, lots of it already allocated, lots of it not. Rules about to come out. It's a bond issue or a series of bond issues. But this is funding that's there that can be coupled with a private sector investment and put in a DIF district for early investment that advances local economies and improves sustainability and climate. It's a win-win. That's why I say you just have to look at both federal and state funding sources as infrastructure money when it comes to climate funding sources as infrastructure money. There's going to be some changes in the infrastructure investment direction under the Trump administration, but the money will be there. We'll just have to adapt to the categories and make them work for our projects. It's not a political statement for us. It's just the reality of you have to assess the sources of money and use them properly or leave them alone. That's a local decision. But all this is to say is that those targets are shifting. Next slide. So alternative two, approach two. We talked about TIF as a value capture mechanism. Here's the greatest value capture mechanism that we've really never used, because when we had redevelopment agencies, we had all this tax increment. We'd go ahead and approve specific plans, which would ramp up the value of land for owners that had no capacity to build. You're talking about LLCs and third generation beneficiaries whose grandfather was a developer and they're somewhere else and they have no intention of developing ever. And thank you, city, for changing my zoning from 2-to-1 to 4-to-1. I really bless you, because now I'm going to put the for sale sign up. And all we've done is raise the ante on recycling and revitalization. So this whole approach to zoning, it says, look, zoning is currency. Capture it. When you do a specific plan, when you do a zone change, make sure you put that density into a reserve account that you control, and then parse it's pre-approved. Parse the density out on a transaction by transaction basis so you can negotiate from a higher land basis for you, not having given that land basis to the current owner, who then turns around and charges the developer, who comes to you and says, I need more money to do what you want to do in your specific plan. So next slide, it's basically create the zoning, bank it, put it in that development opportunity bank, and then trade it as part of a development agreement. Trade it for project amenities, trade it for infrastructure, trade it for fees, charge for it. You can do that in a development agreement. And put that zoning currency in an area where you formed a district. Now you've doubled down on your district. Next slide. And cities are doing this. We're working with many communities where they're creating this development opportunity reserve in tandem with a TIF district to bring forward capital sources in addition to grants, next slide, that make this all work. And the reason why you have this preamble today from us is to say that TIF's powerful, TIF's compelling, TIF has some complexity to it. Joe will walk you through it. But until you understand the business you're in, which is creating value through housing, climate action to generate economic development results, unless you understand that, the use of TIF is like showing up with the ball and it's the wrong ball for the wrong game. It just really doesn't work. You got to get it right. So next slide. So just kind of in bringing this forward, where are we now? So if anything, everything that we've been saying to you is being accelerated by new legislation or recent legislation. This trend is not going away. It's about housing, it's about climate infrastructure. We got Prop 4 money. We have a new form of district, a disaster recovery district that I think goes to the governor this week, will be signed. This will let us create an emergency disaster climate resilience district. Joe will talk about that. We've got the project-specific residential to office conversion TIF money in AB 1445. And we have a bill, AB 1050, that's also pending that would allow us to vacate reciprocal easements agreements managed and owned by shopping centers or shopping center retailers like Macy's and so on, if they preclude housing. Big changes. Still need the tools we're talking about, but the last part of this whole recognition of why you're in the economic development business and which strategy to deploy is based on these factors: market conditions, policy mandates, sources of OPM public money, and this new legislation that allows us to effectuate some of these strategies in a more accelerated basis. That's our landscape. Next slide. I mean, I wish it were a little bit simpler. It's not, but it's definitely achievable. And the most recent sort of advent, if you will, that would enable sort of multifamily housing at some level to accelerate would be CEQA clearances that came through the budget bill. All of this just gives you speed to market. The thing is, I was talking to a developer this morning. He said, oh yeah, my lawyers are poring over AB 130 and SB 131, but they're not so sure that it works for them. Why? Because the kinds of projects that this wants to exempt are at a density level that doesn't pencil in most marketplaces. So even if we make the admission fee easier, faster on the entitlement side, it doesn't mean we hit the right target. That's why going back to understanding the underwriting in the marketplace becomes important. So you know how to use these tools strategically and you know how to effectuate them in a way that maximizes the result. Next slide. So kind of putting it all together is it's about enhancing both the public and private capital stacks, using them in a coexistence way, in a co-terminus way that results in a win project, an unstuck project. And we've given you sort of the ingredients. It's about setting up first your value capture tools. Look at your zoning policies. You get to amend your housing element every 3 years. We're all going to have our report card from HCD, which we're going to flunk dramatically in a couple of years. So all of this gets to reset, right? So you've got your zoning value capture, you've got tax increment, you have OPM, other public money, and you put them together. And that's public policy, economic development tools, private investment, grant funding. That's what can lead to, next slide, economic development success. That's really how it works. This is the toolkit: value capture via TIF, zoning as currency, and grant funding. Next slide. So just putting it to work. I mean, we think even in this shifted economy, even with the constraints of expensive money, believe it or not, all of the policy conditions, all the policy mandates around infrastructure for climate and resiliency and around housing production have actually coupled with a digital consumer-based market to produce opportunity. There are things that the private sector wants to invest in. They want to redo retail and reset it into a place. They want to redo residential and deliver it at an economic value to them. They want to provide jobs and distribution because they need to meet their retail demand in a different channel. So the motivation's there. The question is, how do we in the middle choose and induce projects that create a future for us? How do we choose areas where private investment can be induced? Just putting a TIF in a place they're never coming, no matter what you do, doesn't make any sense. And then sponsoring out of those strategic moves, sponsoring projects that deliver what we want. Point is the sooner you do these things, the sooner you can get it going, and the sooner you can start underwriting deals. So I'd like to introduce Joe Dieguez, who runs our special districts practice, and he'll talk you through the mechanics and some of the nuances of creating the district, which is clearly the number 4 batter in this batting lineup for economic development as we see it today. But it's not the only batter. That's the point. It's one that needs consideration by and between these other tools and these other policy initiatives and market forces. So Joe, take it away, and thanks for listening.
All right. Thanks, Larry. And thanks, Brian, and the GO-Biz team for having us. Joe Dieguez here from Kosmont for deep dive time on TIF. So please strap in. For those who may not be familiar, tax increment financing is actually not new. It has been around for quite a while in California since 1952 when Prop 18 was passed. You had redevelopment agencies for a long time. Some folks on the call may have never interacted with them. They were dissolved by legislation in 2011, effective in 2012. That was the tool, as Larry covered. It was sort of the tool for all. Redevelopment agencies were the power tool. Now we've got some hand tools. We had no form of tax increment financing in California for a couple years, 2012, 2013. It wasn't until a bill called SB 628 was passed in 2014, where TIF became reintroduced in the form of the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, or EIFD. Since 2014, there's been probably more bills than any of us can count. There was AB 313 in 2015, AB 2 in 2015, AB 2942, AB 1568, SB 961, SB 1145, AB 116, SB 780. You can probably make up a number, and there's been a bill on TIF with that number over the last 11 years or so. We go through it because what's going on is the tools are becoming more expansive. We find that they're becoming more flexible and honestly more usable by cities and counties and their partners in the private sector and nonprofit communities. Some of the more recent changes we've seen in 2023 were the introduction of the Climate Resilience District, what we call the CRDs, as a new tool in the TIF toolkit, the Tax Increment Financing Toolkit. Today, snapshot, Larry said, we're about 34 fully formed TIF districts since redevelopment. Most of these have been the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, or EIFD. We've got one of a Community Revitalization and Investment Authority, or CREA. Dozens of others in various stages of evaluation and formation all across the state, all shapes and sizes. We'll talk about them. And we're finally at the point where we're seeing these districts go to market in terms of tax-exempt bonds and in different formats, which we'll talk about, different formats of debt financing, different forms of collateral and leverage, all relevant, we think, to many of the attendees today. Here's a graphic that lots of folks have probably seen, maybe in different contexts, about how tax increment financing works. This may be old news for some, maybe new news for some on the call today who've not heard a presentation on this topic before. Tax increment financing is not a new tax. We always have to say that. It's about drawing a specific boundary within your community and essentially earmarking a portion of the future growth of property tax revenues that comes from the growth in property value above the baseline when the district was formed. So you can draw a boundary around a downtown, specific block, a specific plan corridor. You can put your whole community in one of these TIF boundaries. There are options in how boundaries are drawn. But the key aspect, we often use the retirement account analogy. You're not adding a new tax, but you're saying a piece of my future tax that will come from this district, I'm going to put it in a separate fund apart from my general fund on the city or a county. And those dollars will be restricted for infrastructure, for affordable housing, for climate resilience. And you've got to be specific about that. What are you going to pay for? How many dollars? And very importantly, different from the old redevelopment agencies in California, if you're a city or a county who goes down this path, you can only control your share of the property tax dollar. You cannot automatically claim the share of the dollar that would go to the county or school districts or other forms of special districts. There is a chance for partnership though, but you've got to make up, let's say you're a city, you've got to make a proposal to a county and they can say yes or no. So we're seeing more and more of this play out across the state. We'll give some examples. And so how do you ask? How can counties respond? It's a topic we'll cover today, and it's important. So some of the advantages of tax increment financing, and we will also cover disadvantages. It won't be one-sided in the discussion today. So some of the advantages is resource preservation. So very importantly, I showed a graph where we're talking about earmarking a piece of future growth. But what we're not doing is encumbering a level of today's revenues. Okay, so that retirement account analogy, a piece of future growth, no encumbrance of today's resources. Collaboration is key in a number of different formats. Again, if we're sticking to that retirement account analogy, if you're a city forming one of these and putting a piece of your future property tax income in your infrastructure retirement account, you get the most bang for your buck if you get the county to act almost like your employer, matching your allocation to your retirement account, because maybe the county agrees with the priorities you're investing in, climate resilience, affordable housing, whatever the case may be. So the idea is you're not just playing with your own money, you're setting yourself up to attract OPM, other people's money, other public money in this context. Aside from that, a bit less directly, you're also increasing your priority for third-party grant funding. We're seeing more and more grant application scoring rubrics across the state explicitly mention these types of tools. If you're a city and county that's doing these innovative types of tools, you're getting more points on your application. Even more points if you've got multiple jurisdictions collaborating, like cities, counties, maybe cities and fire districts for wildfire prevention, cities and water or flood control district for flood control, channel armoring, sea level rise, all those sorts of things. Larry covered the private sector. We'll not belabor it, but aside from sending a strong signal to grant providers, you're sending an equally strong signal to the private sector who is on the fence about whether a city or county may be serious about funding a roadway interchange improvement or sea level rise shoreline improvement or some channel armoring for flood control that the private sector needs to know about if they're going to put a shovel in the ground and build in a floodplain or fire danger area. Okay, and the no new tax piece, I covered that already. So lots of alternatives today. I walked through probably 10, 11 bill numbers over the past 11 years. Some of them have introduced brand new tools. Some of them have revised the existing tool set. We spend most of our time at Kosmont talking about the top left two flavors of tax increment today, the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, or EIFD, and the Climate Resilience District, the CRD. I'm not making any disparaging remarks about any of the other ones. They all have different levels of focus, but I'll take the Community Revitalization and Investment Authority as an example that I won't focus on too much today. The CREA in the top right is an example where your boundary has to be contiguous. You've got to set aside 25% of funding for affordable housing, and you've got to qualify to use it, whether it's income, crime, unemployment, designation as a disadvantaged community census tract. There are sort of strings that come along with it. We're finding more and more that the EIFD and increasingly so the Climate Resilience District are presenting a very flexible way for cities, counties, and other public agencies to go down the path of TIF, because you can be non-contiguous in how you draw the boundary. You can be flexible in what you're paying for in terms of the types of improvements. You're not just talking about capital improvements, you're also talking about maintenance. In the case of the Climate Resilience District, you're also talking about operations, the O of O&M. And you know, the spoiler alert, you've got two that are not even on this page that we may have by the end of this calendar year in the Disaster Recovery District, pursuant to SB 782, and the Downtown Revitalization District, pursuant to AB 1445. So it keeps us busy at Kosmont, keeping our slides up to date and keeping the things we talk about with our city, county, and private sector clients. But the punchline is you've got options. We'll talk a little bit more about what those options are, and the options may continue to grow. So some of the fundamentals that govern not just EIFEs from some others of these are long-term districts. We're not just talking about 10-year, 20-year deals. They're authorized for up to 45 years and beyond. And they don't have to be that long. Cities and counties can choose to make them in shorter durations, but they can be that long. Governance is key to all of these. Anyone who's allocating dollars to one of these types of districts, generally you're getting a seat at the governing table that oversees not only the formation of the tool, but its ongoing administration. There are lots of rules about that. There's documentation that's required to be prepared, the so-called infrastructure financing plan, and it really requires government to be specific, to be prescriptive. What am I going to pay for? How many dollars am I going to set aside? What's my time horizon? Who else is partnering with me? Is it a city, county, fire district, water district, flood control district? How are we interacting with the private sector? And that plan, that infrastructure financing plan, it's required to be vetted quite publicly over a series of public meetings and hearings with their own noticing requirements. We're talking mail, newspaper, website notices, and very importantly, because we're not adding a new tax with tax increment financing, there's actually no vote for these districts to form it or even to issue debt from them in the future. What there is in its place is an opportunity for majority protest at the last public hearing, and essentially giving landowners and residents within the financing district boundary a chance to not have to come out and say yes, but they have the chance to come out and say no if they don't like really anything about it. The plan, the concept, the process, really any of it. Climate Resilience District, it's technically in state law a form of enhanced infrastructure financing district. It is a bit more focused. It is meant to be a climate resilient focus of infrastructure, but we'll be very honest on this call, as Larry's kind of alluding to. Almost anything can be climate these days. So many things tie to climate. It's not just your straightforward sea level rise, flood control, extreme heat, wildfire, drought. How about extreme heat protection in the context of buildings being energy efficient or keeping temperature under controls, like what many of us are reading about in commercial and residential establishments. We're finding that transportation, given its impact on greenhouse gas reduction, can be a very tangible connection to climate resilience. So that's a little bit behind Larry's comments about climate resilience districts proliferating, because so many things are tying to climate. Aside from this climate resilience infrastructure, the definition of infrastructure is very broad. If you look at the EIFD law today, I think we're at 20 bullet points on a list that starts with the word including, but not limited to. And it's a bunch of things you'd expect: water, sewer, transit, parks, remediation of contaminated land. And then maybe there are some things that folks wouldn't expect. There's broadband. There's a whole category for climate impact. There's a category on small business and nonprofit facilities. And again, this is a list that starts with the words including, but not limited to. And again, there's that history of 11, 12, 15 plus bills that we think may continue to come and broaden the list further. So there are lots of ties to those former redevelopment agencies. We don't typically spend too much time. We tend to be more forward-looking these days. Many in the industry today never even interacted with the former redevelopment agencies, but sometimes the context helps. Some of the differences that we see in this new age of tax increment, consistently across all the flavors, EIFDs, the CRDs, the CREAs, the list of what you can pay for is quite broad. You're not seeing as much on the eminent domain side, the condemnation side, like you used to see with the former redevelopment agencies. The findings of blight that were required for former RDAs, they don't really exist. The EIFDs, the CRDs, there's a little bit of that with the community revitalization and investment authorities, which I covered earlier. Governance is so different. The fact that there's a governing board that gets set up separate from the city council or county board of supervisors, that's a key difference if you're a public agency representative. You're having two members of the public actually sit on that governing board. Like, it's kind of unheard of with the old forms of tax increment financing to have some form of community representation on a governing board for the district. That's new and it's key. And it's meant to be different from the way the old redevelopment agencies functioned. And there's just a lot more hearings and meetings. You're having to be so much more transparent about what you're going to do. It's really no place to hide. And that's some of what got the old redevelopment agencies in trouble. So really in the weeds here, but that's sort of the point of today's webinar. There's a very prescribed process to form these tools, these tax increment financing districts, and even beyond that, to administer them on an ongoing annual basis. At the highest level, we're seeing the whole process from taking the first meeting on checking out whether one of these things makes sense at all, to getting to the finish line of having one formed. We're generally in the 12 to 18 month time frame. We're having meetings on a daily basis at Kosmont with folks who are just starting to look under the hood here in, let's say, September of 2025. We think it's reasonable for them to anticipate they can get fully formed by the sort of late third quarter 2026 or calendar year end 2026 to get through the preparation of the documentation, the required actions at the city council or county board of supervisors levels, public meetings and hearings with all that noticing that I mentioned, newspaper, mail, website notices, having that final majority protest hearing at the very last step. And this is all really as it sits today. This is pretty consistent with the EIFDs, the CRDs. If one of the bill passes this year, AB 417, it will be the same for the CREA. And again, not to introduce so much uncertainty, but if one of these new bills passes, SB 782, there will be a sort of a shorter, more truncated process available to one specific type of district, this disaster recovery district, for very targeted disaster recovery districts. But the bottom line is that each one of these, you've got a roadmap to follow, and it's meant to be very transparent. I mentioned earlier, it's not meant to be sort of a hype piece for tax increment. There are lots of good things about it. We covered some of that. It's not a new tax. You're not encumbering existing resources. You can get other people's money, all good stuff. But we like to be a little bit more even about it. Some of the disadvantages we all have to realize, it's not the fastest money. When you form these districts, you just establish your base year for assessed value growth. You're not automatically able, like you can honestly in some other states, like South Dakota, where areas where we've been, or Illinois, lots of other states, you can form one of these and issue a bond immediately. That's kind of crazy to think in California context of municipal bond financing. Not the way it works. You form a district, you have to actually see some assessed value growth before any new revenues flow to your district. So it's great. One side, you're not encumbering today's revenues, but at the same time, you're also not generating immediate dollars. So what does that mean? You need to be looking at other tools. Larry talked a lot about this. How do you fill that near-term cash flow gap? It's why we're saying TIF is great, but we're not doing this whole hour, an hour and a half just about TIF. It doesn't make sense if you're not looking at complementary tools, a community facilities district, which creates a special tax revenue stream immediately. That can be near-term funding. A grant at the state or federal level, which can get the wheel turning and get some things moving so that your tax increment financing district can actually have something to capture. Is it just an advance from a private sector developer party who just wants a guaranteed reimbursement source? There's always that need to look at what else beside TIF, okay? On its own, it won't solve everything. We talked about 34 across the state. I was once privileged to work on 22 of the 34 across the state. The common themes we see on why public agencies go down the path, number one is return on investment. Straight dollars and cents as my general fund as a city or county or fire district or flood control district. Is my general fund better off for going down this path or not? These agencies are not in the business of just giving away money. Read the news about your local agency and how their budget is doing. You're not going to find tons of amazing news across the state. Running cities are expensive, public safety, road maintenance. So if you're not actually going to improve the picture, we're not seeing cities and counties even entertain this notion. All right, so the idea is, can you catalyze a level of growth that produces a better outcome in terms of net new revenues, new property tax, new sales tax, new hotel revenues, even net of the new expenditures that come along with that. Net, net, net. If you're not better off for doing it, we're not seeing people do it. And that's despite some of the other benefits, which are important, that come along with this: job creation, housing production, especially affordable housing production, just solving for deficient infrastructure that needs to get solved, whether it's climate resilience or otherwise. The second one, which is typically less obvious, but maybe more obvious now because we've been pounding on it so much in this webinar, is the ability to attract yet other money. It's not just about this revenue stream that you can bond against on a reliable annual basis, but it's the fact that you're setting yourself up to be more competitive for other monies, whether it's state grant money, whether it's private sector advances. You're setting yourself up to be more attractive for investment. The same image Larry showed, the color I'll put on this is you've got cities going down the path of tax increment financing on their own. You've got counties going down the path on their own in unincorporated jurisdictions. And now you have more and more cities and counties partnering together. Cities and fire districts going down the path together. Combination of all of the above. So we're at sort of 8 city-county partnerships, and they're all so different in what they're paying for, as an example. Are we just roads, water, and sewers? Are we all about affordable housing, maybe transit-oriented development, first mile, last mile TOD improvements? Is it all the above? Is it just about climate resilience? So there's so many flavors up and down the state. I'll show some more specific examples at the end of my slides. Tiny cities, maybe 3,000 people, 3,000 people, big cities, San Francisco, Sacramento, San Diego, Fresno, the whole gamut, and everything in between. That county piece is huge. For city representatives on the call today, you may be thinking, look, I like it. I'm not encumbering my today's dollars, but what am I really gaining if I'm just apportioning a piece of my own dollar in the future? And we're more increasingly able to say, yeah, but we're seeing more and more of the public agency partnership. The counties are getting involved. 7 counties have started their own. 5 counties have partnered with cities. And we're seeing more and more that have not yet partnered get ready for that partnership by doing things like adopting policies that govern a county's consideration of whether or not to partner with a city. Golden rule, oftentimes, it maybe doesn't surprise some of the folks on the call today, what counties want to see is that fiscal impact report. What does this mean for me as a county if I'm going to be your partner, the city? Am I better off? Am I just giving away money? I'm not going to do this if it's not a positive ROI. That's just the dollars and cents part of it. Politics, it's just as important. It's not just about getting sort of a county CAO or CEO to get comfortable on a dollars and cents basis. You'll need at least your local county supervisor to understand how this furthers their policy goals on a policy basis, aside from the dollars and cents. And so to the extent there are things like county economic development plans or things that are in parallel to city, more local city goals and priorities, those are the common themes we see in the partnerships. One level of detail deeper, we talked about counties doing it on their own and the unincorporated, just a list across the state from Humboldt in the north to Los Angeles, Riverside in the south, lots in between. More and more cities and counties partnering, Los Angeles, Monterey County, Orange County, San Joaquin County, Sonoma County, and then more and more who've not yet partnered, but who are sort of going down the path of potential partnership. We're seeing some counties adopt policies, Contra Costa, Los Angeles, Monterey, Orange, Sonoma, San Bernardino, Sacramento, and more coming. So lots of ways to access the market. Larry alluded to this, I talked about it. Many of these will go what we call the vanilla format of complete city or general fund segregation, like what West Sacramento just did in their EIFD issuance of about $59 million. It was completely the EIFD on its own, no encumbrance of general fund revenues or assets or any other revenues than the EIFD's property tax revenue stream. That is one format, a very direct way. It's not the only format we're seeing. We're seeing agencies like in the Bay Area or in Sacramento County and Metro Air Park, where you're overlapping different forms of districts, like a tax increment financing district, such as an EIFD, with different forms of district, like a CFD, a special tax district, a community facilities district, where maybe the CFD comes out and issues the bond first, and the tax increment is available to repay or refinance that initial CFD interest. Okay, so different ways to do it. There are others, like Laverne, where a city or a county may come out front with something like a general fund lease revenue financing, and the EIFD increment can be used to pay back that financing. Pros and cons. Pros and cons. Maybe you're getting cheaper rates, like you would with something like a lease revenue financing. You're getting better terms, better debt service coverage ratio, not having to capitalize interest. Lots of different pros and cons. And then the last bullet point, there are advantages that don't even, alternatives that don't even involve issuing bonds. Maybe you do have that private sector partner who is willing to advance the dollar. There's a bank, and they just want reimbursement. Yet another format that we're seeing. My last couple slides, this is a similar theme that Larry's talking about. We don't want this to just be about tax increment. It's great, it's a useful tool, may be for you, it may not be for you. But if it is for you, we're finding that you're still having to look at what else you're having to layer and take advantage of the fact that these tools make you more competitive for other money, or else you're not really utilizing TIF to its maximum capacity. Use it to get better scoring on grants. Use it to get a county match, fire district match. Use it to get a private sector advance where you couldn't otherwise have that. So it's layering of the tools. Won't belabor it, but one of your tools is TIF. It's not alone. Layering it with your own zoning as currency, which Larry covered, with the grant funding, Larry also covered. Won't go into it further. And so very quickly, just to hopefully drive it home, my last 3 points are a little bit about some case studies to maybe make it clearer for some of the folks on this call, how could this make sense for me? I mentioned Placentia in Orange County is the first city-county EIFD in 2019. Placentia is a city of about 53,000 people. They formed one of these at about 300 acres and a large nexus to their Old Town TOD packing house around the proposed Metrolink station. This is an example of an EIFD where you had a high level of focus on what you wanted to pay for, about $10 million of streetscape master plan infrastructure, very focused, first city-county partnership in the county of Orange, mid-sized city, 53,000 folks. Fresno, as another example, is the first city EIFD in the Central Valley, one of the bigger cities at 550,000 people. Here is a larger EIFD, about 4,000 acres, where you had a large focus on housing, affordable housing, large focus on transit infrastructure, and the first in the Central Valley for a city. You've got, on the other end of the spectrum, a small city in Northern California, Mount Shasta is one of the latest smaller cities EIFDs formed just earlier this year. The population of 3,000 people, right? Much smaller, a boundary of about 900 acres. This one is very focused on particular types of infrastructure within this small community, where you're not focusing on hundreds of millions of dollars like you could in Fresno. This is more about maybe you're in the $5 to $10 million range in funding capacity for some roadway improvements, utility, water tank improvements. And the last one I'll touch on very briefly is Pittsburgh. This is the latest city EIFD. This is an example of a city mid-size, about 77,000 people. The district is about 4,400 acres. Very importantly, this is a city that's using the project area feature within tax increment financing districts, where you have one area in purple here, where the city is saying, I have a different set of rules about maybe what I'm allocating, about what I'm pursuing in terms of county partnership, its own set of rules in this sub area, and a different set of rules in the other areas, the pink areas of this map. You have that ability when you do these to break your potential financing district up into separate project areas with different rules, potentially different timelines, potentially different partnership structures. And some cities and counties will use that function, some may not, but it is available to you in the state law. So happy to talk about more examples in the Q&A, but for now I'm going to pass it out to Larry to close us out, and then we'll both be available for some Q&A.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Joe. Let's go to the next slide. Just wrap up with a couple of slides. So what you're hearing, actually, which is most important, is that TIFs are a very, encompassing strategic tool that have a huge financial upside to them, but they need early money. But more important than that, they need a business plan. I often say to folks that remember redevelopment. In redevelopment, we were like the kids that came to the sandbox with our toys, but then we took everybody else's because we could grab their tax increment. This one, we come with our own tax increment and say, hey, Brian, hey, Joe, I have an idea. If I throw in mine, can I get some of yours? And together we can do this. So this is different for the public sector to think about this way. I saw questions. Is this good for rural? See, cities seem big. First of all, this is an evolving industry that's expanding. You can see the legislation. Second of all, you saw the diversity of uses. It's not the location. It's the business plan and your potential partners and the sources of early funding to the business plan. Just like a private sector business plan, this is the mirror of that. You need people who will jump in, other agencies who will jump in. You need your community to get behind private investment that would foment the value based on a business plan that helps the private sector deliver, based on a business plan that helps another public agency become your partner in the infrastructure financing plan. So these are business plans. The tax increment is just an instrument, and these are really revenue generators. Next slide. And the observations that we would have and why this is so timely, we call this time is now, the time is right, is because private sector capital stack's expensive. Even when it drops 50 basis points, it's still pricey. And so these public-private partnerships, which finally can take the form of a business plan that a private sector investment group can take a look at and say, hey, I see where they're going here. That coupled with other public money enables these things to go forward. That's why the timing is good. That's why you're seeing the proliferation of EIFDs and now climate resilience districts. And basically, the housing mandates in California, if we know how to use it, it's like sort of the feng shui of the tai chi of zoning, is if you take those mandates and move them around and pick areas that you can charge for the density that you're delivering. Remember, you're just charging for density to deliver the very amenities that everyone wants to enable higher density living to be copacetic. So we're all going in the right direction. It's just that these compliance formulas leave no capacity for improving the neighborhood. They just throw density into the equation. So you're able to really take an aggregation of an economic development business plan with state compliance on either housing and climate infrastructure and put together a program that engenders investment and produces results, right? So, and they keep becoming more flexible. Next slide. So that's where we think the future is that this market's evolving. I won't go through these pieces of legislation again, but this is about to change in the next week. Again, we're going to have a different kind of district. We might have site-specific TIF office to conversion districts. These are game changers. And so that continues. There's a lot of momentum around these, in addition to all the CEQA exemptions and so on. Next slide. But back to the basics. Look, if you're going to use these, we started out this way. So you need a roadmap, and the roadmap starts with understanding your own financial capacity and priorities, and then moves to figuring out what's in the marketplace so that you can select your best opportunities to pursue. And then you can figure out which tools match your needs and the momentum in the marketplace, or where the marketplace is stuck, so you can unstick it using those tools. Important, you have to engage your community. This is a big landscape of decisions, and you can't do it just from City Hall. And then you've got to engage specific projects so that you understand that they would tee up and make the investment if you made the investment. If you create the district, are you in? Because you need that early tax increment. Next slide. So that's the pathway. I mean, again, because TIF is that surgical tool, you still need to educate, you still need to engage, you still need to enable and entitle. Those are the things that have to get done collateral to TIF, and communication, next slide, is really, really key. The way we view it, the true roadmap to economic development is multidimensional in California. And it's you see on the far right, these special districts, but it's also about financial management. It's also about climate action, land use, as we talked about, zoning as currency, and housing is the major mandate. I mean, this is the landscape of where we work in and where we live in, and Kosmont's interest in working with GO-Biz to take this messaging out to you is to understand, so all of us can better understand the business we're in. And by the way, next slide, in case we don't understand, TIF just might be job security. You could be replaced at the end. So we're thinking that this is a good way to go, any which way you take. Next slide, and thank you. I want to close out, open it up for questions. I think, Brian, I'll hand it back to you. And we appreciate the time and the attention we receive from everyone. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larry and Joe. Really appreciate that comprehensive and thorough overview of TIF districts. And Larry, I really appreciate you and Joe for highlighting additional financing resources apart from TIF. I mean, as these webinar series progress, we're going to be highlighting how some of these additional financing resources can be utilized to capture value from a community, and really appreciate just sharing that context prior to Joe's presentation on the importance of value capture and how TIF districts and can lead to value capture and attract additional sources of public and private funding. Yeah, we do have time for Q&A. So I do see, Joe, looks like you already responded directly to several questions in the chat. Thank you so much for doing that. We do have another one right now from Allison. She is asking, redevelopment is triggering a significant form of disenfranchising populations by race. Has this come up, and how are cities and counties building trust and community given this history?
Yeah, I'll start. And Larry, I know you have a ton of thoughts on this topic. Maybe mine are quick. I'm finding that there are people who are just entering this industry now who weren't involved in the industry prior to 2012. They had no idea what redevelopment agencies even were but they're feeling the impacts of it. There's so much bad blood, whether it's between cities and counties, whether it's within sort of nonprofit or certain disenfranchised portions of local communities and the public agency, all these hangups from this tool that's no longer available. We encounter it a lot. And so when we mention it, we are very deliberately saying, what was that? And how is this different? To reiterate just a couple of those points, there are things like eminent domain, which was like a huge controversy for many of the old redevelopment agencies. That's not really a feature that's available at all. You're not seeing any of these new forms of tax increment use that at all. You're finding the ideas of government, where there were portions of the community that felt completely left out of the conversation in some instances of your development. There's no place to hide now in this form of redevelopment. You have, 2 seats on the governing board, which was never a thing in the past, local community representation. You've got an incredible number of opportunities to plug in, mandated by state law in the public meeting and hearing process, and these notices that need to go out, mail, newspaper, different types, recent changes that we're seeing with even translation of the notices in languages when you've got portions of the population who don't speak English predominantly, sort of very well, pursuant to the American Community Survey. So we encounter it a lot, and we proactively try to do it like we did today and saying what's different today than how it is in the past, because we need to learn from those mistakes. So these don't get dissolved like the old ones got dissolved. Like, hopefully quicker answer. Anything, Larry, you want to add to that or no?
No, just make sure everyone understands that I totally agree with Joe said, and they're much different creatures, if you will, and I'm glad for that. But understand that TIF is sort of like the highway, right? That what you put on the highway, if it's a gas guzzler, which maybe redevelopment was as an analogy, that's one thing. If it's an EV vehicle, like perhaps climate resilience districts are, that's a different result. So we are basically using the flexibility of TIF as a way to engender community improvement, not disadvantage. That's what this is about. And you get to do that. You get to define that in your infrastructure financing plan, which is the document that everyone discusses before formation, instead of some sort of agency prepared diabolical blight plan that was all focused on saying what was wrong with everything and why we ought to take everything out by condemnation. So we start out in a much different premise here. That's all. So nothing's perfect, but this one is much, much better. And then we have a local agency. Our economic development team is very interested in this finance tool of TIF. That said, next step to get going with the TIF or any IFD. If you just want to hang on, I'll stay on the call and we can walk you through it. Kidding. There's a lot of good information. I think Brian's going to make available this presentation.
Yes.
You have our contact info, whether you use us or someone else. Be glad to exactly explain how you sort of gin up the next step. But the most important thing, you saw that slide on educate. You first find out, which TIF and which areas make sense just at the high level. And then based on that, what Joe and I find is we could put together an education presentation. And just before you go too far down the road, and again, to avoid some of the mistrust that might be out there, is to educate everyone on the tools and throw up some possibilities of things that you could accomplish. You go to the council in a workshop, and that really helps. It really helps start the conversation in the right way and create momentum. So that's one way to really gin this up.
Thank you for that, Larry. I see we got a question about the recording. It won't be posted directly on the GO-Biz website. We will post it to our YouTube channel, and we'll send out the link to that, and the prior recordings and the recordings of all the sessions going forward will be posted on our YouTube channel. We'll send that out in a email to all the registrants after the session. So.
No, the truth is, Brian said he didn't want to commit to posting it until he heard it and saw if he liked it. So now you're hearing it's going to be not true. He's going to post.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat at this time. We do have several more minutes, so if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And if you have any that you can think of afterwards, you can message me. Larry and Joe put up their contact information. They can message them directly as well. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. Um, but while we have a few more minutes and waiting to see if any additional questions come through the Q&A box, I was wondering, Larry and Joe, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. You kind of alluded towards this in the presentation, but out of all the case studies that you've worked on in forming, establishing these TIF districts, what kind of reservations have you seen from county, city officials, and local residents when it comes to their formation? And have you seen any major protests in any of the public hearings? And if so, how did you navigate or overcome those criticisms or reservations?
Joe, I'm going to let you handle most of it. Let me just start by saying the two big negatives that get dispelled in the conversation is, wait, no, this is a tax. And so
Hmm.
once you say, no, no, this is not a new tax, it's it's a value capture, then I think things start to change. That is a primary condition. The second one that we hear, and that comes from the county or other possible joint venture public agencies, says, no, no, you're not taking our tax increment. Why would we give you a nickel? Just spend your own.
Hmm.
And that's that but for discussion that we say, well, yeah, but if we throw in our shekels together, then we do this. And by the way, you can put something on the infrastructure financing plan that you want done, and we both agree on it. That becomes a spending plan. And that's when the initial objection becomes a partnership discussion, right? So those are going in the gate. Those are the two that you see all the time. And believe it or not, they're typically fairly easily dispelled as long as you have a genuine approach and a transparent set of answers and your calculations are accurate and not overinflated or overly indulgent. Then the rest of this, though, really, I think, Joe, if you want to chat with, so, we saw, for example, in Sacramento, there was a recent challenge on a proposed EIFD, and Joe can walk you through the technical, but
Sure.
it's a protest vote. So Joe, you want to take him through that, and that would help.
Yeah, happy to. The usually pushback that we get is often not from members of the public. Usually, as soon as we make it very clear in our outreach that it's not a new tax and explaining that there are different ways to draw the boundary, and maybe just because you're not in the boundary doesn't mean you won't see the benefit, because it's sort of a counterintuitive case here that you can pay for things outside of the financing district boundary. So you put up a map and folks are either stressed because they're in it or stressed because they're not in it. It's either, what does this mean? Am I paying more? No. What does it mean if I'm out? Am I not seeing the benefits? Also, no. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it's the education that's needed up front to proactively dispel any of those misconceptions. So you're not seeing it from the public. Where you do see some friction sometimes is county conversation that you mentioned, Brian. It's not only in the counties, even within the cities or fire districts or flood control districts. It's like, what does this mean to my general fund? Am I just giving up property tax that I need to keep my budget balanced? Am I just going to receive this dollar anyway, and I'm just moving it from my unrestricted general fund pocket to my very restricted infrastructure project pocket? And that's what Larry's talking about. There's got to be a defensible set of numbers that meet what is often called the but-for test, that the districts in place to catalyze some level of growth, some level of private sector investment that would not happen or happen as fast or happen as intensely, but for the infrastructure investment that you're making, right? You're not going to be able to build this set of townhomes because you're in a high fire severity zone and you can't get fire insurance unless there's a set of improvements to address the fire risk, or if you're in a floodplain and the new residential or commercial development is just not going to achieve commercial property insurance without flood control protection. So it's the but-for test. It's a defensible set of numbers that need to sell at every level: staff at the city and county level, public agency, and then just local stakeholders who want to see their money used appropriately. On the protest thing, we did see the first protest. I mentioned the process allows members of the residents or property owners within the boundary of one of these to protest at the last public hearing. And you've only seen it once in the 34 plus that have been formed. And there's probably a whole backstory that I don't even have time to get into today. but there absolutely was kind of a signature raising effort. We believe at least part of the issue was not a high enough emphasis placed on affordable housing. This goes to one of the questions asked just a few moments ago. How are you addressing the needs of historically disenfranchised groups of folks? This is a case where at least part of it was that group of stakeholders didn't perceive a high enough emphasis on affordable housing as a priority. So they used this mechanism in state law to put a stop or put a pause on it with this majority protest. So that's at least part of it, the affordable housing piece. There may be more and more angles that we didn't have time to cover today. We weren't directly involved at Kosmont. We didn't work on that one, but all of these kind of have their own story.
Yep. And I see one other question here, Brian, you want me to take it on? So yeah, how do you bank the zoning, right? And it's really the opposite of a specific plan where you just give it away and say, hey, at the end of a hearing, you say, voila, it's all yours. In this case, you create the zoning density based on public policy, so it's approved. You put that zoning in the Development Opportunity Reserve, Development Opportunity Bank. But when you adopt the bank that you create and when you move that density there, let's say you move 500,000 square feet of density in a prescribed area. Could make it citywide, but let's say you just do it for a prescribed area, which matches your TIF district. So that 500,000 square feet is approved, it's done. With it, that same night, you also adopt a list of infrastructure and other community amenities that would be the trade-off for that density. That's the beautiful thing about this, is that you are creating value because you're letting the community know, I'm not giving away this density. I'm only giving it away if on a residential project over 50 units, I'm just making some things up, we get a street light or we get a pocket park. That list could be anything the community wants. That's the nice thing about it, because you're just creating currency, and what value you put to that currency is up to you. Of course, you need a market analysis, a real estate analysis. We do that says how much is a square foot of residential worth in this location so that you can price that density properly. So that's it. You create your amenity list, and you also put there that and any other amenity or improvement that is deemed appropriate for the project, right? So you leave yourself the flexibility. So what this does is it takes that density away from Pep Boys, and the family that's owned Pep Boys for 3 generations has no idea how to build a mixed-use project. You haven't given them that value, but you've made their property more saleable, but you just haven't given them the ability to escalate every dollar in the equation, because guess what? That developer that you're trying to get in to do this project has to go to that property owner, negotiate a price, and says, look, I have nothing. I have a clue that the density is approved, but I still have to submit a plan. I still have to negotiate infrastructure improvements and amenities. So the risk is mine. So what is that? 10% more than the average market price? Fine, but it's not 100% more, because the value creation gets to the city that adopted the currency of the zoning, and to the developer that's taking the risk and engaging with the city to produce that product. That's the beauty of this. It moves the equation to the parties that need the value to create the result. And that's how you do it. And we have a primer we can show you. Just contact us, no problem. I like that.
Thank you for answering that, Larry. All right. I'm not seeing any additional questions coming across in the Q&A chat. So with that, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. If, as a reminder, if you do have any questions you'd like to ask for Larry, Joe, or myself, you can contact us afterwards. I second what Adrian said. This was a wonderful presentation, Larry and Joe. Definitely worthy enough to post on our YouTube page. So we'll definitely be making this available.
Hey, Brian, thank you, by the way, for having
Mhm.
us on, and thank GO-Biz for taking, this is a brand new thing, and I think it's a
Yeah.
great program that you're doing. So we really appreciate it. The governor's office is doing something really great for us. Thank you very much.
Really appreciate that. Really appreciate that, Larry and Joe. Thank you so much for taking time to share this informative presentation. So, with that, I think we can go ahead and adjourn. Real quick, as a quick reminder, looking ahead, these sessions will be hosted on a monthly basis, second Thursday of each month, same time, 11 a.m. to 12:30. The next session will be taking place October 9th, and that one will most likely focus on state sources of financing, and we're looking forward to having a very in-depth presentation on that. So once again, thank you all for spending part of your day with us. We look forward to seeing you at future sessions, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.